Get experience however you can. The experience brings so much with it, right? But being successful in entrepreneurship is not so much about what you know, but I think it's more about your networks and who you know. And the experience not only gives you that hands-on like examples where you have use cases to think back to when you're trying to sort things out and everybody's looking to you to solve the problem, but
Hmm.
also the people you meet along the way are the resources that you're going to reach out to later on. You need employees if you're starting a business. You're going to need subject matter experts, right? And if you haven't spent any time in this space developing those networks and connections through the experience, it's going to be really challenging to find it when you need it in the moment.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Joshua Karrasch. And as a quick introduction to Joshua, so went to high school, and then after high school went into paramedics school, went into the Navy, graduated college also with a undergraduate in pre-medicine, and then went off to DC and worked in counterintelligence for a period of time. Did a startup worked with the startup as a physical retail store. I think that business ended up going bankrupt after a few years, but then went into consulting with the federal government for a while. Did an insurance company, after which now he's on his third startup, which is what he's doing today. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Josh.
Thank you, Devin. I appreciate it.
Hey, excited to have you on and looking forward to a great conversation. So I just took a much longer journey and condensed it into the 30-second version of it. So let's rewind and unpack a bit and tell us a little bit about coming out of high school, going into paramedic and Navy and pre-med and all of those things. Tell us how your journey got started.
Surely, surely. So I early on, I picked up my dad's EMT basic book when I was like 12, and I fell in love with emergency medicine. Started pushing wheelchairs in the ER. The next year, became a lifeguard. Did firefighter EMT basic and nurse's aide at 16, and at 18 I got my paramedic in Pittsburgh. And I worked there for a couple of. I worked in outside of Pittsburgh for a couple of years until 9/11. I was on duty on 9/11, and so that kind of motivated me. And I joined the Navy in January the next year, January 28th, 2002, and spent 5 years 5 years serving in the Navy, mostly on the West Coast. Spent a little bit of time in Kuwait, and then a little bit of time out in Fallon, Nevada, but mostly in California. And when I got out, I went and I was still very focused on becoming a physician. So I was seeing my own patients, diagnosing. As a corpsman, you can do a lot in the Navy when it comes to medicine. And so I was pushing hard for that goal of going to medical school. And so I went to UC Santa Cruz to wrap up my degree.
So
And
wait,
I was,
just really quick, just to fill in the gaps maybe a little
yeah,
bit. In the Navy, did you do medicine related things, or were you more just an officer coming in, or kind of what did you do in the Navy prior to or going into pre-med?
oh, sure. Yeah, no. So I was enlisted and I was a Navy corpsman, which is a Navy medic. And so I was fully medical or medicine focused because I was a paramedic already.
Hmm.
I went through Navy Corps School in half time, which put me out of rotation for combat field service school. So I couldn't actually go serve with the Marines. I got stuck on the blue side. So they sent me out to a hospital in Lemoore where I was working in the urgent care clinic, and I got the chance to do some instructing there. And then when I was in Kuwait, I got to run a sick call clinic on a daily basis. So it was a lot of fun. I got a lot of hands-on experience and understanding in medicine, much broader than just being a paramedic. So I really knew what I was getting into, and that I truly wanted to be a doctor. So yeah, it was a really good experience for me.
No, sounds like a great way to get some experience and serve your country and utilize the skills and see if you like the direction you're headed in. So with that, so now you're coming out of the Navy, going into undergraduate and doing pre-medicine. Is that right?
Right, right. So the Navy also gave me my GI Bill, right? The two important things you get out of that was your education and your home loan, right? Guaranteed home loan. And so I took advantage of that education, and I ended up at UC Santa Cruz, and I was working on my psychology or my undergrad in psychology and pre-med. And at the time, I was carrying because on the old GI Bill, you didn't get enough to actually get a degree. You got a little bit of money. I think you got a monthly stipend, and you chipped away at your larger amount, but it definitely wasn't enough to pay for a UC education. And so I was working 5 part-time jobs while I was doing about 22 credits on at UC Santa Cruz. And one of those part-time jobs was being a paramedic, and I had a couple of really bad calls that kind of soured me on medicine. And at the same time, I found out that I'd missed one freshman class, and it was in 2000. Oh, it was a 2008, 2009 timeframe where people didn't want to leave college because there was the economic challenges, right? And so they weren't able to take a graduating senior and put me into a freshman level class, which required me to stay for a whole nother quarter to finish up my prereqs for pre-med. And it all just came together, and I was over it. I was like, that's it, I'm done. And so at the time, the only positive job growth was in Washington D.C. And so loaded all my stuff up, sold the camper trailer I'd been living in for the last couple of years, and I drove across country to DC. And I didn't have a job, and I was just trying to figure it out as I went. Ended up working as a carpenter for a while because it's a skill set I have. And while I was doing that, because I built UC Santa Cruz's veterans program, I thought I would, and I advised statewide in California on how to bring veterans back to higher education as they came back from deployment. I thought I had a really great resume to get in on Capitol Hill and be an advocate for veterans. And so I hand delivered 185 resume packages to the offices, and I got 185 no's. So that's cool, At the same time, I was putting resumes out just about any place I could find them, because I don't know if you've ever worked in Virginia in July, but it's not pleasant in the summer outside. So I was really working hard to find a job, and the Pentagon Force Protection Agency actually called me and asked if I was interested in an interview. And I honestly didn't even remember dropping a resume with them. So I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so the interview went well, and they asked me, why they should hire me, because I had no security experience at the time. And I said, well, I have a habit of delivering dividends when I work for people. Just give me an opportunity, and I'll do what you need me to do. And so they did, and I did, and I spent about 4.5 years there, and I went from physical security to counterintelligence. I got tired. I mean, I had a nice office, nice desk, door closed, great view. It was a good place to be, but I was just bored out of my mind. And I read the 8-Hour Work Week, right? And I don't even think I finished that book, honestly. I think I made it about halfway through, got the crazy idea of like, oh, I'm going to start a business, and off to the races I went. And I punched out of my comfortable government job, and I started my first business I started it in late 2012. I punched out in 2013. And it went well through 2017. The end 2017 is when that ended up bankrupting, and so that was quite the experience. But I learned a lot. I remember talking with a friend over coffee. I was like, well, they say you got to lose a couple of businesses to have a successful one. So I guess I better get busy losing one. And I was just being a smart aleck at the time, but well, turns out I was pretty on point. So, but yeah, it was a good experience. I learned a great deal.
So now, just out of curiosity, and I don't want to pour salt in the wound by any means, but if you're to look back and say kind of what led up to that bankruptcy, because it was, there's a number of reasons, anything from, hey, I didn't have the experience, I didn't have the right background, timing wasn't right, market wasn't right, people just didn't get it, it was ahead of its time. So kind of what was the business of it, and kind of what led to the initial success, and then the bankruptcy that you built on with the subsequent startups?
Yeah, so I would say my major challenge was a lack of experience. I'd never worked in retail before, right? So I didn't understand. So I didn't understand much about startups because I'd never had one, and I don't read all the books you like. There's just no way you're going to understand it until you do it. And I didn't understand retail. And so there's two big challenges. And then I was bootstrapped, right? So I didn't have a large pot of money that I could throw at problems to get through them. I had to work through them and still make enough profit to survive. And I think those two things coming together really were the end of it. I did all the bad financing all those bad things they tell you not to do, right? Swipe the credit cards and use your personal resources. So I used my retirement. I used all my credit. I was able to get an SBA loan. And so over that what was it, about 5 years or so, I learned a great deal. And I think at the very end, what I realized is that I never really had enough financial resources to buy a big enough inventory or make a big enough investment in inventory that I could turn that rapidly enough to use those profits to survive. And that's what retail is all about. I mean, that is at the core of retail, what retail is. And I didn't understand that when I started. By the time I figured it out, I was so far down the path and burdened by all the previous decisions and challenges that it just wasn't able to be revived. And so as I was looking at the numbers one day, I believe that your finances are the science of business, and I spend a lot of time in my numbers. And as I was doing my projections, I was looking out and it's like, there's just no way. There's no way that we're going to be able to keep it alive. I'm simply going to incur more loss as I continue down the pathway. So rather than running it all the way to the end and let it be a dumpster fire as it spun down, we decided to spin down in a responsible manner. And so we spent 2 months spinning our clientele down, transferring them off to other folks, transferring their merchandise off, and it worked out. I mean, fairly well. I mean, sure, there was the bankruptcy, but it is what it is. It's not. It sounds a lot worse than it actually is when it comes to bankruptcy. Like, I was terrified of bankrupting or failing, right? And because I had it all in the wrong frame of mind. Like, failure's a horrible thing, but really I couldn't have gotten where I am today without going there back then, right? And bankruptcy is it's just numbers. It's just a legal proceeding. It isn't terrible in the least. And I remember what pushed me to it is after we closed the doors, I was I didn't have a job. I had nothing left. It'd been really not an excellent time as we spun down there. And I was still working diligently to pay the bills that we owed, because we paid all the people that we owed, but there were businesses and creditors that we owed. And so we were working to close those bills out. And I was doing it through odd construction jobs. I went back to doing construction work. And, I was having a hard time making those ends. And some bill collector called me and he threatened to have me arrested and prosecuted for theft and fraud. I was like, well, that's it. I need to get a lawyer involved, like, because I didn't know, right? I mean, I'm just doing the best I can, and so I was like, all right, well, I need to get somebody involved who knows what's going on, because I can't risk this. And so that was when I decided to pivot to the bankruptcy attorney, and had that bill collector not scared me bad enough to turn to the attorney, who knows? I could still be working through that very large number as of today. And I definitely would not have had the opportunity to rebuild my life after that. So I think it was a good pivot. As failures go, it could have been a lot worse.
Oh, and I said sometimes the failures, you learn everything from what you did wrong to what you didn't know to how you might do it right next time. And it's an iterative process. And bankruptcy, no matter how you do it, it's still never a fun thing, but it can provide the opportunity to wipe the slate clean, so to speak, and to work to make people as whole as possible during a bad situation, and then also give the opportunity to move forward. So it sounds like, kind of out of the ashes, so to speak, it provided a lot of opportunity. So you went back, and I think you said you did you did construction for a period of time, and I think you did a bit of consulting for the federal government as well after, or coming off the startup.
Funny story about that. So as I was unemployed after the bankruptcy, looking for work, I was of course doing anything I could find, TaskRabbit, the whole nine yards. And more than once in my life, I've fallen back on my construction skills to be able to feed myself. And so that's what I was doing. And in Northern Virginia, one of the things about having a business in Northern Virginia is you build your networks really fast, because there's a lot of people that do a lot of different things there. And so I ended up at a gentleman's house who was having me dig out a stump in his backyard. Well, it turns out he was in IT, as was his wife. And so as part of my recovery plan, I was teaching myself Kali Linux and trying to take my security background from the Pentagon into the IT space, right? And so I was digging stumps and doing yard work and just rambling about what I was learning. And I was teaching myself, and he was listening. He's like, "Well, would you like a job in IT?" I said, "Well, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life." and
Digging
so it
out
turned out,
stumps, job in IT. Yep, this sounds like a good decision.
right, right. Well, so his wife worked for Capgemini Government Solutions. And so she referred me in as a software tester because after we talked for a while, when I had my retail business, I was building software solutions, right? I automated the shipping process, I automated paperwork. I mean, like, I kept building these technology solutions. And of course, when you build something, being a paramedic, you implement a treatment, you test the treatment, you implement the treatment, you test the treatment. Well, you implement a solution, you test the solution. Well, that's IT, that's software testing. And so they hired me as an entry level software tester, and that gave me my toe back in the door. And primarily, I think they hired me because I had my did I have my master's? Yeah, I had my MBA at the time as well, so they could bill me fairly well to the federal government. I'd also worked in the federal space, so they knew they could employ me, and so I was a lot lower risk than somebody else off the street. So they gave me that opportunity to try, and I did fairly well there. I did fairly well. I grew, over a couple of years, I grew fairly fast, and that's where I picked up on Salesforce. I rolled off a project. I was sitting on the bench, and somebody walked through, and it was like, "Hey, do you know anything about Salesforce?" And I was like, well, "What's Salesforce?" And they asked if I had a project. I said, "No, I'm on the bench." And so he's like, "Well, learn Salesforce." I said,
Hmm.
"Okay, sure." And so I Googled Salesforce. No clue. No clue what a CRM was. I mean, I used Zoho actually in my business, but I didn't understand how to utilize a CRM. Like, I had the use cases, but I had no clue how to apply the technology. So I went to town learning about Salesforce, and because I didn't know anything about it and I didn't have anybody guiding me, I went to the trailhead. I got the wrong trail mix for the Salesforce admin. And so I went through and I completed the trail mix. I'm like, "Great, I'm done. I'm going to go test." Failed miserably. I failed miserably like 3 times to get my admin. What I found out was once that I understood everything is that there's an actual Salesforce endorsed trail mix for admins. I was doing somebody's halfway trail mix, and
Hmm.
so I'd only done about 50% of what an admin should have done to learn the job. And so eventually, I got through all of that. I got my Salesforce admin cert, and that's how I got my toe in the door as a Salesforce consultant. I ended up at an FDA project, then went over to USDA, punched out of there, worked at Fontiva for a year or so, and then USDA wanted me to come back, and that's where I really got the start to take Dynamic Specialist Group from just my side business, where I had a place to bill hours, so I could report earnings and so forth, to a true company that could afford to retain me and cover my expenses. And so after Fontiva, I took that, grew it, and went back to USDA and was basically the only person on the contract, the only person in the company for another year or so until I had enough buffer to bring another person on, and that's how we've been growing. The story of a bootstrap startup. Onesies, twosies. You bring somebody on, you earn a couple of contracts, bring another person on, so on and so forth. Um, it's a nice way to be, though. You don't really have to answer to anybody but yourself and your customers. So
No, makes perfect sense. Sounds like it was a great opportunity and provided for a lot of a good path forward. So now catch us up a bit to where you're at today. So you did the Salesforce, you took the opportunity, you went forward, you did everything, got the half of the training, did the whole training, left and started or went back in the startup world. But kind of where did that, catch us up? Where did everything end up today, or kind of where are you at now?
So now I own Dynamic Specialties Group, which is a CRM consulting firm. We're fairly agnostic when it comes to the CRM platform. We are a Salesforce and HubSpot partner, and that's actually kind of a unique and interesting niche for us to be part of. Where some folks have one or the other. There's a lot of folks out there, a lot of businesses who have both platforms, and so we're finding that the ability to work on both has been very helpful in helping us win business and serve our customers better. So currently, Dynamic Specialties Group, I founded it in 2018. We're 7 people strong today. We have 3 full-time employees. We have 3 part-time consultants, and then 1 part-time overhead for office management. Our contracts, I think we've got 10 or 11 live contracts right now that we're working in the Salesforce and HubSpot space. And we just picked up a federal subcontract to continue to provide software testing services, IVD services to USDA. So we're slowly but surely growing into a more stable space, a little bit out of that startup space, and more into we could see 6 months to a year out versus just a month out, which I think is a pretty nice place to be. We're in that 3 to 5 year stride. So
Awesome. Well, it sounds like a great direction. So now as you've, got the next startup in the queue done, you've been in there or been in business for a few years, learned a lot, continue to grow. Where do you kind of see the next, 6 to 12 months headed for you guys? Kind of, is it just continue to do what you're doing and grow and expand new services, new products, something completely different, or kind of where do you see, or retiring and going off and living on an island, or any of the above? Where do you see things headed?
Oh, one wishes that last one was an option. We're not quite there yet, though, right? So, no, I think the next 6 to 12 months is going to be a lot of the same. Just getting better at what it is that we do. I think running a good startup is finding out what it is that you do and then repeating that process until you are the best at it. And I think we're in that repeating that process phase right now. We have identified who our target clients are. We're able to reach them fairly reliably, and we're able to provide the services we need and have a good outcome. And so I think it's just continuing to hone that process until it's truly automated, and then grow it. Right now, we are also working on getting our GSA mass contract in place so that we can continue to grow our federal contracting arm as well. So I'd like to see us priming a couple of contracts or partnering on a couple of federal contracts there. Because while they're not the highest dollar value, they are definitely stable, and they can provide stability to a consulting firm. So I'm hoping to diversify a little bit there.
No, sounds like a fun and a good direction to head, and always diversifying the business, or having avenues where you continue to grow and expand always is beneficial in providing additional avenues of growth and stability for the business. So it sounds like a fun and great direction to head. So, well, with that, now as we've kind of caught up to the present day of the journey, and even looking at a little bit into the future, it's always a great time to transition to the 2 questions I always ask at the end of each episode. And we may have already touched on a bit on the end where we talked about bankruptcy, but who knows? But I'll ask the same question anyway, which is, now along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So starting a startup without the experience in that space, I think that was a pretty bad decision on my part. Having no experience in startups, having no experience in retail, leaves me poorly equipped to be successful in that space. So while I learned that I should know what I'm doing before I go starting a business in that space, what I did figure out is taking that initiative and that step forward to learn it was critical. Because again, I couldn't be here today if I hadn't gone through something like that at the beginning, I don't think. So I think it's every failure is always an opportunity to win. The only time it's only a loss when you stop and you let that failure end what it is you're endeavoring upon. So yeah, no, I think it was a really good experience. Worst business decision ever, and yet turned out to be probably the foundation of being the success I'm experiencing today. So,
well, sounds like a great, as we already chatted a bit before, but a great mistake to learn from, and an easy one to make. A lot of times you think that, hey, I'll be the exception, I'll know more, I'll figure it out along the way, and it won't be a big deal. And sometimes you're right and you get lucky, and other times you get that learning experience, and then you incorporate that into the next adventure. And that sounds like what you did, and a great thing to learn from. So now the second question I'd like to ask is, now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Get experience however you can. The experience brings so much with it, right? But being successful in entrepreneurship is not so much about what you know, but I think it's more about your networks and who you know. And the experience not only gives you that hands-on like examples where you have use cases to think back to when you're trying to sort things out and everybody's looking to you to solve the problem, but
Mm.
also the people you meet along the way are the resources that you're going to reach out to later on. You need employees if you're starting a business. You're going to need subject matter experts, right? And if you haven't spent any time in this space developing those networks and connections through the experience, it's going to be really challenging to find it when you need it in the moment. I mean, God forbid you win like a 20-person contract right out the gate, right? And all of a sudden you've got to staff it. If you haven't spent any space or any time in the space where you can find those people and be able to evaluate their skills, it's going to be really challenging for you to control the product you're delivering in the long run. So I think the number one thing is to gain some experience in the field if you can. Like I did. I funded my own experience, and but there's other ways to go about it. So
no, makes sense. And I think that's a great piece of advice. And I think getting experience in the field, and that can be everything from taking courses, finding mentors, working for someone else that's done it, going out. And sometimes it's just, if you can't find that, then you have you can do the school of hard knocks, and sometimes you'll learn it along the way, and sometimes you get to make the mistakes and apply it to the next venture. And so I think that's a great takeaway and a great piece of advice. So
you mentioned something
go
real
ahead.
quick there. I'd like to continue on, Devin, is the mentors piece. My first business allowed me to meet my mentor, and I got to tell you, a life-changing event. And so if you could find a good mentor, and not like the mentors.com where you get matched up with somebody you've never talked to before, but I mean somebody you can jive with, that you can trust, and they've got the experience, that can make a significant amount of difference as well. Because I mean, a mentor, it can make all the difference. I think that's critical. If you can find a good mentor, they'll help you along your journey.
Absolutely. I think, mentorship, and I said, it doesn't have to be the mentors. I don't even know if there is a mentors.com, but wherever
Right.
it is, find it wherever you can. If it is mentors.com and that's your best option, certainly a mentor can still be good. But I think a lot of times it can be people that have experience in the industry, people that you worked with in the past, people that you meet along the path. There's a lot of ways to find mentorship, guidance, and get that experience. And whatever the avenue that works best for you is definitely a great thing to help you along your journey. Well, now as we wrap up, if people want to be or reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure. Of course, you can find us on the internet by Googling Dynamic Specialties Group. You can reach us at dynaspecgroup.com. I know, working on that URL there a little bit. We're on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me at joshua@dynaspecgroup.com. And I would imagine you could probably put my contact information with this as well in the comments. So that might make it a smidge easier for people to find us. So.
Perfect. Awesome. We'll definitely encourage people to reach out, make a new connection, support a great business, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Josh, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you other listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to share these journeys and help even more startups and small businesses along their journey to success. And on that note, if along your journey you need help with patents or trademarks or anything else, just feel free to reach out to us. Go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. And we're always here to help. Thank you again, Josh, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin. I appreciate you. Be well.